Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Jenny here. So happy to host yet again the one and only Clif High. He is just so wonderful, one of my favorite people ever, and is gracious enough to allow me to have these interviews with him and just pick his brain on subjects that are hot, um, relevant and a lot of fun. So, without further ado, Cliff High, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much.
Sure, Jenny. No worries at all. Glad to be here and chat with you.
Oh, well, that's awesome, folks. We have some really cool topics to discuss today. We are going to discuss tarot in its many facets, but namely how tarot can be utilized for different forms of manifestation. So, as you guys know, I am a card lady. I am a tarot card reader myself. And I am just overjoyed to be able to have this discussion with Cliff and get his thoughts on this. It's a little bit controversial. Not everybody is really sold on the idea of tarot as a divinatory practice or something that has, a use case in the modern world. But I can tell you that it certainly does, as can my clients. So, Cliff, yeah, what are your thoughts on tarot and manifestation, please?
It's not okay, so it's a complex subject with lots and lots of complexities, but each one of them is relatively simple. Okay, so tarot works because of the very nature of our reality. And I have um, atypical, we can even say peculiar in this modern age, method of thinking about our reality. So I don't think about the grit, the sand, the molecules, any of that. I start at the other end of things. And so the gritologists, they want to think about the physics of how two atoms smash together and all this kind of stuff in an attempt to try and understand consciousness. And I eliminate all of that and I start with consciousness. And so my understanding is that there is supreme consciousness and the illusion, and nothing else exists. And Jenny is part of the illusion. I'm part of the illusion. All of our lives are lived within the illusion. We are participating in it. The illusion exists for the purposes of supreme consciousness. I speculate that supreme consciousness is trying to see if novelty can be created. If something that is new could arise that it wouldn't know about ahead of time. I think that that's what this is an experiment that way. The place
Mhm.
we find ourselves is the materium. That's where all this matter stuff gets in the way, where we can sit our butts on something, have coffee, that sort of thing, right?
Mhm.
But here's the thing, the matter is an illusion, all right, as are the tarot cards themselves. But tarot cards themselves are emblems, individual icons
Mhm.
that reach into uh, or are uh, selected in a combination in manifestation. So when you do the tarot, you are actually manifesting. Okay. So
Mhm.
Jenny flips the cards, she shuffles them, she does all of this stuff, she gets involved with it, she puts energy into it, she's aware of putting the energy into it. But what's actually occurring at that level is that your what they call subconscious is interacting with the greater subconscious that is the supreme consciousness. And at that level, that supreme consciousness is participating in the shuffle. It's arranging which cards will appear at what point and how close they will be to the potential for you to pick them out. And as you go through your shuffling routine, your ritual, until you get to that point where you have a feeling where your energy settles and you have a feeling that the cards have selected themselves, which is really the case, and then you pull them out and read them, right? But until then, you are in this sort of dance as a co-creator with the supreme consciousness, the greater consciousness that is universe that runs the illusion we're in. If you think about things this way, it becomes very easy to understand how supreme consciousness can participate, right? Because it's all an illusion. It doesn't have to move lots of atoms and stuff because it's simply making the atoms appear in your mind anyway. There is not a lot of fiddling around. There's not physics involved in it. It's merely thought. And that thought that we express in a particular way is reflected or replicated within the supreme consciousness as we do our thing here, right? So, supreme consciousness wants all of us, each of us, to succeed. It's better that we all succeed in our stuff.
Mhm.
Karma, suffering, all of this is a prompt to get us to get our act together and go out and succeed. Now, in dealing with tarot, Jenny's mind is connecting to the energy of the person she's doing a reading for. And so there's this duality there. And then she's connecting with the greater consciousness in sort of a trinity kind of thing. And so all three of you at a mental level, in a very factual way, within this illusion where facts exist, are participating in the shuffle, in the selection. And then we get into the more delicate aspect of the interpretation, in which Jenny has to interpret that against the information that she's being given by her energetic, I won't call it intuitive, I'll call it energetic, her energetic contact with the person she's doing the reading for. Makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. It really does. It's a co-creative process. I've always held to that, even, as a very young person, I think, 24, 25, getting into tarot, I had a sort of a cellular or intuitive knowing that this was a combination of forces working together to generate something of a reflection. I like to call it a reflection. There's a wonderful analogy is that tarot is a mirror, and essentially, depending on what the questions are, what the inquiries are, they're reflecting different phases of an energy or different configurations of what is essentially the same energy, which can be correlated to points on a map where, originally tarot, I believe, you guys can fact check me, I believe tarot was invented as a game, sort of a to entertain the courts of the day, the royalty of the day, sometime around the late or early 15th century.
That's
And
okay. So that's factually very wrong, Jenny.
oh, okay.
That was when it was imported into the Western society, and
Thank you.
that's how it
Okay.
was presented. But I found references to um,
Egypt.
courtiers, no courtiers in Persia,
Okay.
going back to the Zoroastrian time, like way the hell back in what we now call Iran, in the Magi schools, and that's where it originated as an aspect of manifestation. Okay,
Wow.
so the idea in manifestation is that we're co-creators. We co-create our bodies. We co-create everything because our subconscious is participating in the illusion that we perceive. And the guy that I read about had the idea that talismans of all kinds, I Ching, interpreting the lay of the sand after the beach, after the wave leaves it, all of these different kind of things are in fact pointers through the illusion to the underlying nature of supreme consciousness and what's going on. So it need not be tarot per se, but the first formalized knowledge I have of tarot comes from, I think it was probably the third century BC, in Persia, what we now call Persia. And then later, as you say, it was brought into the Europeans, and it was, they had that big issue of, the Catholic Church saying you can't do magic. And so it had to be brought in as a game.
Ah, that makes sense, right? That makes sense. We do similar things these days. We're like, no, no, it's, we kind of have to take a bit of an undercover role, you know, to kind of protect ourselves from ignorance, right? So,
Right.
no, you're absolutely so that, anybody that looks at the layout, if you really look at the book. I think of tarot as a kind of almost like a book or a compilation, a kind of map. Really, if you zoom out, it looks more like a map than a deck of cards, and it's very plain to see that you can attribute a lot of these points on the map to the ancient tree of life. But certainly, it has many different names. But this is almost like a blueprint of the human experience as expressed through symbols and alchemical symbols and planetary sort of the inclinations that the planets influences rather that the planets have on the human system and on Earth. So it really is just an endless sort of lesson. I'm constantly learning more about tarot each and every day. And as far as manifestation, there's so many levels to it. I will often, instead of just asking the cards a question, instead of, prompting with an inquiry, I will just allow the cards to reflect to me whatever it is that creator or source or whatever you'd like to call it um, would like to guide me to put my focus on that day. And then I'll use the archetype of that card as almost like a meditative focal point or a type of talisman um, that I will then use to explore, those doors, walk through those doors of my own mind. And in that sense, that's not a divinatory application of the cards of the system of tarot. It's more of a meditative, educational
It's
um,
a template.
template. Yes, that's a great word for it.
Yeah. And you're doing what is more formally expressed in the business world as the perfect day meditation. So
Oh,
there's all these guys. I don't know if Tony Robbins does it because I never follow any individual work that way, but these the people that do the pump you up for the business leaders, the motivational guys,
yeah.
they have this tool which is actually part of the manifestation process, and it's called the perfect day meditation. And basically, what you do is you take some time in your day. The best time to do it is between waking and getting out of bed, or between getting in bed and actually falling asleep. So, those two ends of your day when your brain is in theta state is the best time to do it. And what you do is you simply sit there or lay there. It's best when you're laying down and imagine what your perfect day would be like. Just go through it however detailed you want, however much time you want to put into it, and just do this as a repetitive process. And then at some point, put a little energy into it. Once you got the process itself down, put in a little bit of energy for um, a little emotional energy. And then you'll start noticing that the elements that you've been thinking about within your perfect day start appearing. They'll actually start manifesting in your life because universe is reflecting back to you what your mind is putting out. So in a sort of a reverse sense, tarot can be used as a template to guide you in what you're thinking about to create the manifestation sets that you want. And that's what these, I think they were pre-Zoroastrian. I don't really remember the association to the tribe for the original tarot. And in the original tarot, there were like 51 cards. Um, but when they did them, they used them as a template for group level manifestations,
Oh, wow.
where multiple people would try and put emotion behind a particular idea such that it would manifest for all of them. And that's basically the idea. So with manifestation, you're participating in your life. Everything in your life is at your control. And this. I mean, you can have pain, and then your focus on it makes it into suffering.
Mhm.
Prior to that, it's simply pain.
Mm.
So all aspects of your life are simply you're controlling how you interact with the illusion. And if you think about it really deeply, you get into the esoteric, philosophic kind of stuff, and the soul and all of this. And the explanation is very simple for all of this stuff. If you start from supreme consciousness and work on down, your soul is simply an aspect of the illusion. Your soul is prized because without your soul, you fade back into supreme consciousness. Okay,
Mhm.
so for all of your lives, you have the same soul. It goes from life to life to life, and it gets better with each life. You actually get better at this shit as you go along. Anyway,
Ooh,
though, which is good, right?
yeah,
but,
yeah.
but anyway, the manifestation stuff, you can cure any problem in your life if you approach it right, and your approach is pretty good. With the template of the tarot to focus on specific aspects, and that's sort of what they did in a way back in this king's court, where they had these tarot cards. The guys would each do a pull of a certain number of cards, and that was the director for them for that day in terms of how they focused for their part of the manifestation. They were very satisfied with the process. So, for them, it worked really well. And I've got to say that, manifestation as a thing is a decent way to run your life.
Mhm. It certainly does, sort of shift one's mentality from everything is why is everything happening to me, to at the very least, taking some semblance of accountability and that I have got to be responsible in some way for, at the very least, attracting these experiences that are negative or induce suffering and pain, that sort of thing. So tarot, and I've heard it all over the years. Growing up in a government with a government background, my father's line of work, and just the way society is set up is not really all that friendly towards divinatory practices and esoterica as a whole. Although that is changing to a degree.
Well,
Um,
you're right though, but of course, figure it from their viewpoint. The church, the government, the powers that be, they can't have you be self-actualizing through manifestation, because then you have power and you don't need to pay attention to them, right? The
right.
ultimate of this, of course, is the manifestation of the loaves and the fishes and the wine and all of this kind of stuff from Jesus, right? And Jesus was not a savior in the idea of the Gnostics. He was a revealer,
Mhm.
because he stumbled to this, and that's what his Book of Thomas is all about. And that's why I wrote it, was to just get beyond all of these people that thought that these sayings of Jesus were about weird religious shit. They're not. They're about even stranger manifestation stuff. So, but yeah, you can see how the powers that be, government especially, they don't want you to know this.
There's somebody at my door, and I'm telling you, this only happens
Well,
when.
we're doing this. Go ahead, Jenny. I'll
All
just
right, give me 1 second, folks. I'm
sure.
so sorry. Okay, I am back.
So, what did we manifest there?
A new filter for my air conditioner.
There you go. Hey, perfect.
Clean filtered air is very important. And I live in Florida, so we deal with all kinds of environmental stuff. I think the humidity actually it binds itself to the chemicals that they spray in the environment bind themselves to the moisture in the air and
Wouldn't
just
doubt it. Scary stuff. Yeah.
it is. I mean, my gosh, can we manifest getting rid of the people that spray that shit in the
Okay.
environment?
So, all right. So, yeah, we could, but it wouldn't work that way. All right.
Right.
Manifestation is a straightforward process where and Neville Goddard, I think, was one of the best
Love him.
practitioners of it. But he had there's a couple of things you need to know about this, though, and I wrote about it. I put some stuff on my Substack. I wrote this book, The Eyes to See, about the 114 sayings of Jesus and how they're all explicit instructions. But Neville Goddard broke it down. But there's something people miss with Neville. Neville was a professional dancer. He made his living as a dancer. This gave him an incredible level of body control. And it was an incredible level of body control at an unconscious through his unconscious mind. So he was not aware that a lot of the manifestation that he was doing was actually from his body participating. So basically, what you do within manifestation is you get an idea, and then you make that idea into what we call an imagining. And I'll get into this in a second. Then you take that imagining and you move it over to a specific part of your brain and you let it be there for a while, and you gen up some emotion at that same time. Now, basically, as near as I can tell, almost any emotion will do it, but there's karmic blowbacks for doing it the wrong way, so to speak. So I've had emails from people that say they can manifest up a storm, but only with rage as an emotion. And that's not good. It's degrading the body, and the outcomes are never really good in the long run anyway. But anyway, so you have this idea then of what you want, and you get an imagining. So you flesh it out in your mind as much as you can to get a really good solid picture of it. But you don't have to get into detail. The point is to not get into the detail, just to get a solid picture of what you want at an imagining level. And then put emotion behind it that basically says that you are living already in the state of that having occurred.
Mhm.
So that's the goofy part that nobody could ever really get a handle on it, and Neville could really not explain very well, because that is the aspect of having your body reflect the emotional component of your mind. And so Neville always talked about it being settled. And what he was talking about was being settled in his body. There was no agitation, there were no contrary tells, this kind of thing.
Mhm.
So when I was battling hidden cancer for 30 plus years, my body was always producing negative tells around the cancer, which influenced everything I did. So you have to be very aware that this is a complex process. Each part is relatively simple, but you need all parts together. And the emotional component of it has to go. You can put a lot of emotion behind it. You can put rage, love. It's not wise to use want or longing. Okay, so you can't manifest a human, because that involves the emotion of longing. You have a longing for that connection, and longing doesn't do it. And anything that produces an idea of lack in your mind will not do it. It has to be producing a sensation of fulfillment. Entirely different mindset. So once you get that idea of understanding what emotion needed to be done, then you just stop and you just live at that stage. You don't put any more emotion into it. You don't think about it much anymore. And you just basically watch as it manifests. And an easy way to learn, an easy way to get into this, is to do that perfect day meditation and put, however many elements you need in your perfect day, that kind of thing. You don't want to do it where you're imagining yourself with the perfect latte or something like that. You want it to be a little bit more challenging, because the idea here in the manifestation process at this stage is to do it as a test and see what emerges, right? Um, and I can get into that in another level about the tarot too, which I will in a second. But so in this case, the perfect day meditation. So you had 5 things, that you wanted in your perfect day. And then you just live as though that perfect day had already happened. And then just watch. You'll be amazed at how many of those things start popping up in your life fairly quickly. Now, there's the issue, okay? There's always going to be a time delay. It can be rapid, but it's not instantaneous. All right. So this is because Supreme Consciousness created the materium through this medium that we call the ether. And the ether is subjected to or responds to our mental condition, right? What we put out through our minds, through that vibration and resonance. That is actually a quasi matter. Okay, they call it dark matter and all this other shit in physics, but the quasi matter of the ether actually is sort of a physical stuff that has to respond to change the reality that we're living in. And the way the reality changes is that we are blinking in and out of the illusion 22 trillion times a second anyway. So it's easy for Supreme Consciousness to instruct the ether to reflect your thoughts back to you and do it in an appropriate way. And of course, if you're, if you don't control your mind and get involved in all the dark aspects of things, then you're going to get a reflection back from universe that's rather dark. And that's why we're all subjected to all this constant propaganda from the powers that be. And they're trying to constantly degrade us and constantly put us into a dystopian mindset. That's why
Mhm.
all the movies are negative. That's why all of the shit's been this way since the 50s when the Masons took over a big section of government and we had this sort of split and they started being really active. Then all of this stuff started rolling out. One of the things they have to do is they have to keep us all in this negative mindset as much as possible in order that we, A, don't discover manifestation, and B, that they can use our mental energies to their end. So this is the way of it. This is why tarot was originally used, these 51 cards. Um, the leader wanted to have manifestations in a particular way. They were working on it. They knew what was going on, just like with Jesus. These are the guys that will ultimately become what are known as the Magi that are referenced in the Bible, the three Magi that show up at Jesus's birth, right? That myth.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, these Magi guys had the tarot, and they would, at the uh, request of the king, they would do a pull on the tarot to see basically the query was where within the social order could they put their effort and imaginings in order to get the social order to go along with whatever their program was, right? Whatever they were trying
Mm.
to do. See, so it was an early form of um, like a social survey. They didn't have the concept then of going out, seeing what was on everybody's mind and this kind of thing. So they used this approach to do it, and it's all really interrelated with the huge history of manifestation and the suppression of it. This is why the Catholics in the in the crusade against the Cathari throughout Europe, okay,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
because the Cathari were what were known as the two principal people, and they practiced manifestation. And in their reality, they had people that were growing themselves to perfection, had many lives, and were living their lives, this particular life, as a perfecti. And that's a person that has perfected their life, and they don't have all the stress and all of this kind of stuff. They know what they're doing at a very deep level. And the perfecti within the Cathari were the ones that did the divination. They did the prophecy. They were the ones that walked into the event stream and saw what was going to emerge. And they were the ones that guided the Cathari um, manifestation efforts as a group. And so, it's been this way throughout history.
Mhm.
Anytime this stuff starts popping up and getting into the social order, we have these purges. So, the people that do tarot are very wise in that regard, but they're splintered from their roots. So they
Mhm.
don't really know how deep it goes back.
Oh, certainly. And so many amazing points that you make there. I just wanted to make a note to those of you that are listening and say you are, interested in tarot, either on like sort of a hobbyist level, casual level, or if you're really wanting to immerse yourself in the world of tarot. I do encourage you to move with that instinct. Because I can say, from personal experience, 24, 25, I had no interest in tarot until quite literally one day I was guided very strongly in that direction. And it was something that came, I've been calling it lately the collective geist or the collective ghost. I've always been a receptive person. But when I tell you, it was quite literally a voice in my head repeating on a loop that, ultimately guided me directly to my first ever deck of cards, the Thoth Tarot deck. Um, but I do believe that these systems seek out, through forces, they seek out the people that are just natural practitioners or natural intuitors of this. And I'm not trying to say that it's not for everybody, because I can tell you also from experience that anybody can can use tarot to some degree. There's always something for someone in the system of tarot. But if you're feeling like you're interested in it, and you're like, okay, this is my sign, I do encourage you to, acquire your first deck. And if you're not ready for the deck, get a book on the subject. I liken it a lot to a map of the human experience. There is no experience that can be had by a human or humans that the tarot can't illustrate. It can. It illustrates all experiences that have ever been had or could be had by human civilization. It's all in there. And it's been a fascinating exercise to apply modern, sort of modern definitions of ancient symbolism or ancient concepts that have, over the period of a millennia, many eons of change. We still deal with the same concepts that ancient people dealt with. It's just, instead of calling it telepathy, now we call it the internet. There are all of these new modern um, applications for these concepts that go way back. And I hold to this. You don't have to be a psychic, an intuitive. You don't have to be super into
But
as
everybody is, though, Jenny.
right. Thank
Everybody
you.
is. Yeah.
I forgot who I was talking to for a second.
Yeah, exactly, right. But hey, look at this too. Um, when you do manifestation, you put an emotion behind an image, and you put that into a particular part of your brain, and it goes out and resonates. Well, emotion is the key both ways, right? Emotion is what gets the attention of, quote, the subconscious or the supreme consciousness. And how does supreme consciousness deal with Jenny when it wants to move Jenny? It puts an idea in her head and puts emotion behind it. That's
Mhm.
why. So you were not, it wasn't supreme consciousness, in my opinion, was not simply out looking or it wasn't a case of Jenny just on her own deciding. It was the supreme consciousness selected you. You were ready, right? It was time to change you and make you change this way.
Oh, 100%. And it's interesting how it works. That the whole notion of divine timing is very much true. I wasn't ready for that system beforehand at all. My frontal lobe wasn't even fully developed yet.
Right, right.
I quite literally needed to reach the age of 24, 25 before I was even able to, have the maturity to handle, the system of tarot. Um, but
Well, that's
certainly,
also, by the way, you go right to the point. That's why men are no good at it,
ah,
because the frontal lobe doesn't develop until the early 30s, sometimes mid 30s to completeness. And our emotional aspects of things are different. So we're not emotional receptors. And there's a key difference between men and women relative to manifestation, which goes right to the point of tarot. So, in my opinion, there may be good men that are good tarot readers. I think they'd be very much better at astrology and that kind of thing, but they're
mhm,
going to be very few and far between. And almost any woman would beat the best man simply because of the nature of emotional receptivity,
mhm,
range of emotions, and then the fact that they have a unique talent in this materium, and that is that they can bind consciousness to flesh through birth, right? Men can't do this. It's an entirely different structure in that aspect alone makes our minds different. Some aspects of it show up in our brains, but huge amounts of it show up in our mind. And so, like I say, I wouldn't go to a male tarot reader. It just, I just don't think it would work. Uh,
right.
and I would suspect that uh, people that are both intuitive, women that are both intuitive and emotionally aware would be the best, right? Because they'll know their own internal body clues in terms of knowing how to interpret the cards, et cetera, et cetera.
Certainly, I'm not sure that we could narrow it down to a saying, but there is this understanding that the woman protects the man in the spiritual realm while the man protects the woman in the physical realm. And this is, one really beautiful part
100%. Yep,
of
yep.
our
Okay, and that's actually, again, you go right to the focus of it. Men can manifest, okay,
mhm.
because we can't bind consciousness to flesh. The way in which our emotions work within the muscles of our body, when we put them in there, is such that we send out a vibration that will indeed manifest in the material. Women can be taught. So that's the 114th saying of Jesus. This was the last saying that was collected by Judas Thomas in the Gospel of Thomas. And in it, Jesus is confronted by the disciples saying, she's no good.
Oh,
Exactly. And these guys were Pharisees. Bear that in mind. Okay. So they were from the Second Temple era, or from the Pharisean lineage that leads up to the Second Temple. But nonetheless, they had a terrible view of women, right? Um, and that was reflecting of their questioning here. But Jesus's response was that he was going to, that, back off, dudes. I'm going to teach Mary to be as a man in terms of manifesting, because women can be taught. They can be taught and become very effective manifesting people, right? But usually they're not. Usually they don't have an interest. Apparently, the universe doesn't want to move them that way, whatever. And so there are not that many that do, but they certainly can. And there's a couple of like gotchas for how the manifestation process works that have to be altered by women. And you'll see some YouTube videos out there sometimes where you'll run across a woman saying, well, I was trying to do this and I did all of this kind of work, nothing happened. And then one day I discovered that if I just thought about it this way, it went into a different part of my mind. And then thereafter it happened. And so there is a level of subtlety that probably has to be approached for women by a woman instructor. And so they actually can manifest. But natively, their emotional resonance with the supreme consciousness is going to make them the other way, right? They're going to be much better tarot readers, much better divinators in all forms than men. They're going to be naturally called that way. They're going to respond that way. Um, and probably for most of them, it's not worth the effort to do the manifestation.
mm. Well, it's fascinating too when you come to realize that women were outlawed. If a woman was found to be studying, the esoteric arts, it was something that was, unless they were in secrecy, the mystery schools where my understanding is even the women were not allowed to be part of the mystery schools.
Correct. Yeah.
So when people like to give me crap these days about the work I do, I say, listen, it wasn't it wasn't that long ago that a woman could be destroyed, for studying these things. So I take it as it's an honor to do this work. It's a privilege to do this work, and I do it in part for all of the women that came before me that couldn't, or they had to do it in secret. So it's truly
Or hey, or in all of southern Germany, because they were all Cathari. They
Mhm.
only left the men there, and they accused them all of witchcraft. This is in the 1500s. Every female under the age of 7, and that it was entirely the whole region. Was not a woman to be found in any of the southern provinces of Germany, and it was
Well,
because the Catholics had decided that the Cathari were using divination tools against their that was an affront to their religion. They were one principle people. They're very stupid, but they were powerful at the time. They're operating in the materium and don't have really an understanding of the rest of it.
something that you've said in an interview, this was years ago, but it has always stuck with me, and you might recall me mentioning it since then. But who is the Hypatia?
Yeah, yeah, she was a Gnostic. Okay, she was one of the most famous manifestors of all time,
Oh,
Hypatia. She
and
had
what they did to her.
I know they had a cult. She had her own cult. It was sort of a Judas story again. She was sold out by one of the cult members, and her enemies found out where she was having dinner, and they got her as she was leaving the building and bashed her with stones, and
Mhm.
they threw all of her flesh and blood and everything into the ocean, took her bones, and then they burned them.
And the reason, and I'll never forget the way that stuck with me and resonated so deeply. And this isn't, I mean, her story was, in its case, it was unique. However, the destruction of the physical body, at least they believed that what this would do would afford their lineage time to basically handle the threat
Correct.
being, the true holders of light, the true holders of the knowledge, the true manifestors. The soul then gets pushed into a type of compartment, and that soul has to then rise above the trauma. And what that does is essentially affords our enemy Earth years to manage
Correct.
the
A
threat, to
gap.
mitigate.
Yep. That's why they burned the Knights Templar too.
Ugh.
So that for men, you have to burn them. You can't the bones, because like myself, even so many of us during a life will have wounds where something will go down to the bone. That's not it doesn't happen with women, so the trauma is huge. And so for men, they burn them, and they figured it would give them an extra, what did they say, 700 years, something like that. But it's the time is now. The people being reincarnated now are the Cathari.
Well, that's how it feels. I don't know that that's what I am or we are or anything like that, but I will tell you, I've always felt motivated by a mission that felt so much larger than just my own little life, my own little experiences, my own identity. And so I think, this is a type of, we're living through a continuation of a sort of battle between principalities that is as old as the earth. So I hope that we can collectively manifest a timeline of increased awareness, maybe some safety for those of us that want to practice. I get threats all the time. I have people that they would, it's,
Yeah,
yeah, you know how it is.
I know how it is.
You
Yeah.
know how it is, Cliff.
Yeah, we're moving there, Jenny. Things are breaking loose. The control system is failing. It's running into the splintering of, or it's running into the complexity collision. And so, as complexity rises to a certain extent, their ability to control it begins falling away. We've long passed that, and then we'll cross this threshold, which is very near, where they will be fighting simply to control their own little tiny fiefdoms, and everybody else will be going off doing our own thing. So the amount of complexity, splintering, new subjects, new everything over these next few years is just going to be mind numbing, and it will numb you if you try and pay attention to everything. So it's best, in my opinion, to just concentrate on a few things that resonate with you and let the rest drift by. Universe will bring it to your attention if you need to, is my understanding, right? But you're you're quite right about all of us and the reincarnation of it all and where we're all headed at the moment. It's quite fascinating. Three Eye Atlas being here, it's for sure alien. There's aliens out there messing with our um, eternal now in the event stream. So here's a concept for you. So, universe is the supreme consciousness, and it creates these little energetic containers out of itself called souls, and then it puts a little bit of itself in each one of these, sort of like creme brulee in a little container, right? And so, and it cooks us up, and we become a life, and a woman binds our consciousness to flesh here in the materia. Now, in that reality, in that understanding of reality. Um, the It's possible, as Jesus did, as he saw, and same with Judas Thomas and so many others, and myself included, it's possible to alter your mind. That's all that is required. And you change, and instantly you change a giant component within your brain. And you're no longer living in what the material world calls time. You then instantly recognize time as a duration. And all of a sudden, you start looking out at everything. And for many people, they'll think of it as a hallucination. When this happens, they'll think of it as a breakthrough, enlightenment. All of these different of concepts are applied to this phenomenon. When it occurs to you, sometimes it takes years for people to settle into it. Sometimes they reject it. It's too frightening. They think they're going crazy, all of this. In Jesus's second saying, he said, those who would seek should continue seeking until they find. When they find, they will become disturbed or troubled, and then they will become astonished. and then they will rule the all. And what happens is that you get this view and you start seeing reality building itself in front of your eyes. This occurs in your brain. Your eyes don't change, but your ability to perceive does. Those who have the eyes to see can see.
Mhm.
Once that occurs, then you no longer I can look out and I can see distance. I've got a decent view here, but all I have to do is to just move this component in my mind, and all of a sudden I just fade over. Both of them are existent in my vision at the same time, but I get to see what's known as the living Father, the pleroma. And to describe it, it is as though every molecule that you're seeing is flashing at you at a very subtle level. And you realize that they're flashing into existence right in front of your eyes in order that this might appear to be matter. And you can see the thing, or the living Father, as Jesus called him, on the other side there, that from which all of this stuff emerges. And it's all basically being perceived by you as light. But in any event, though, you also perceive the event stream. And Hypatia was one of those first that described her encounter with the event stream. And she likened it to standing in a stream, a stream bed, and having the river create itself just ahead of her hands. So it would just, there
Mhm.
was no water miles ahead of her. It was just creating itself just ahead of her hands, which she had stuck out there. And so she had, I think, in Greek, she had one of the most poetic descriptions of the event stream. But that's what you do. You get to this point where you emerge and you can see what's going on at this level. As this knowledge spreads, as this ability, and it's just a mind trick that you encounter as you do manifestation. And then you start seeing these things and you start seeing this reality in a different way. And that, I think, is going to participate in a big way in changing the reality itself as more and more and more people fall into it and experience it. And I do not think that this is in any way an accident. In this reality, there are no meaningless coincidences and there are no meaningless things that arise. Everything that arises is for a purpose at some level. And it's just a matter of our perception on it, right?
So
Some
many.
worse than others, but yeah.
Well, you bring up so many points. I just wanted to mention, the here with AI, and the algorithm, which I think is a kind of it's a bit of a trick, because I talk to a lot of people and they're like, Jenny, my phone is listening to me, or I'll get, and I say, hey, it is.
It is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It absolutely is. And I want to just let people know, in case I don't already know this, maybe I'm late to the game, but this is something I've come to understand, is that there is a distinction between the AI algorithm and the divine or natural algorithm. And really, what differentiates those two is going to be the personal discernment, your ability to really make a distinction. This is a new, I would say this is a new challenge for humanity. I don't know that we've ever had to deal with AI in this context, in this unique way. But absolutely, the AI seems to be communicating with from the inside of our bodies due to the metallic stuff, the graphene, the nanobots, you name it, it's there. But I don't want, it can be very easy, especially, in this day and age when we're all very thirsty for information and we desperately, genuinely want to connect. We want to be part of the change. We want to feel God, know God, and hear God. Sometimes the AI will use that against you, and it can be tricky. I'm not this person that thinks that AI is inherently evil. I think AI is more of a mirror reflection. What we show it, it'll reflect back to us in that way, depending on what kind of AI we're talking about. But there is a real distinction between, sort of what you are attracting to yourself, through the electromagnetic field of your heart pulling things into your awareness, versus the third party companies that are buying your information, and the AI is tracking your shopping, your searches, and then sort of regurgitating this into what could be considered signs. And you guys can't see me, but I'm doing the bunny ears, bunny quotes with my fingers here, the signs. That's just AI. And it could be helpful for us to deter, make a distinction between AI and the divine.
Well, here's another wrinkle for you, right? Here's an even further thing that leads me to being even a little bit more of an iconoclast that way. So I'm with those people, Hypatia among them, and a number of the great Gnostic thinkers that says there's supreme consciousness and then there's the illusion. Within the
Mm,
illusion is the materium, this place where our butts are matter and we can sit on things. And this is where we have this illusion of individual consciousness. Without this illusion, we're simply part of supreme consciousness. So, therefore, anything that is divine, so we have to watch our words. So, anything that is divine or is a god or is a representation that way is within the materium by its very nature. It's also within the illusion. It is not the supreme consciousness, not the source. So Jesus didn't worship Yahweh. Jesus worshiped no God. Jesus only in two passages said anything about worship, and they were directed to the mountain, the living Father, the pleroma, okay, also known as the monad, although he didn't use that term, and that's supreme consciousness. And he, in his 114 sayings, he rails against religious authority, rituals, fasting, sacrifice of animals, all different kinds of things. And this is why the Gospel of Thomas is not included in anybody's Bible, because it says churches and Bibles are full of shit,
mhm.
and you should not mess with them. Instead, you should follow the way of the living Father and do the manifestation do the co-creation for the world that you want. Live in the life that you want, and it's this easy. And here's how you do it. And here's the real problem: the levels of complexity are quite huge. We have the propaganda trying to control our minds. The propagandists know the ultimate propagandists, those who direct the ones that are actually doing the work in social media, they know that that human minds are co-creating this reality. And if they can get all the human minds to be dystopian, they can create the dystopian reality in which they have all of the control. So the good versus evil paradigm kind of thing at the mind level is the real battle. And so everybody that's doing the examination of our reality, that is saying, look, this is what I can see that is not what is being projected upon us, is doing quote divine work at that stage, because you're pushing everybody away from the illusion, from the control within the illusion. If you can see the illusion itself, then you can also see those who would control it, and you just don't pay attention to those guys anymore, right? You're out there screwing around. You're in here with us. Yahweh, any of these people show up, it's like, you're a god. Okay, your ass is in here with the materium with me. That means you're subject to the same rules in this materium as I am, more or less. And you're not its creator. This gets you into all kinds of trouble with the religious people, but this is going to be the paradigm that we're going to be going into, is this ontological understanding. And we're going to have to, because of the space aliens,
Mhm.
simply having to take them into account. Because here's the thing: as soon as they're here, which they are with 3i Atlas, and we know they're here with the UFOs and so on, but nonetheless, in a big official way, they're here with 3i Atlas. Well, they're actually out there in our event stream manifesting here. They're manifesting their reality and their future in our
Mhm.
local event stream. And it gets really much more complex as we go along and start thinking about it. But
Oh,
so this is our reality, and Jenny's going to be helping us in this great global battle against the evil forces out there.
I'm gonna do my best. But when I tell you, some things I think, over the course of a lifetime, when we're little, we have the necessary tools that we need to deal with what's in front of us. And as we grow older, we gain tools, we gain wisdom. So it's sort of the evolution of the intuitive person or the warrior, whatever archetype, suits you at that time. But I did want to just mention something about 3i Atlas. I uh, I was asked to do several readings, tarot readings on it. Now, I don't have.
Recently?
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. So, I had my take on it personally was quite blank. I didn't have any predisposed understandings or wants or fears or anything. So it was pretty blank, which is usually it's a good thing to start from there. And I'll tell you, so I pulled some cards on it and several times different people wanted me to look at it. And I would say that this was a combination of tarot reading and a type what I'll call a spontaneous remote view. I've not been formally trained in remote viewing. It's just something that happens sometimes.
So all right, so let me be clear then. You in that moment, you felt you had an emotional connection there.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
And
cool.
it
All right.
and this is what's super interesting about it is that I perceived Three Eye Atlas through the lens of the flora of our planet. And what I mean by that is the trees, the plants, the mycelium network. Literally, I realize that's not, a plant in the same, it doesn't have
No, no,
photosynthesis,
no,
doesn't.
it's no, 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 it's a plant. Yeah, yeah, it falls in that category, yeah.
Yeah, and so what appeared to happen, was that the closer that Three Eye Atlas came into our space, the more that this was even just talked about, which can very much, have the resonance of presence, the more that we discuss something, it appeared that it was interfacing with our flora on such a to such a degree, quite literally the trees and the mycelium network, the shrubs, even the quite literally even the algae in the ocean. Okay, the deep sea is sort of the oceanic plants or the
Right.
oceanic sea life, namely the flora, was having some kind of an interface with Three Eye Atlas, almost as if it was drawing out from our flora.
That's what I was gonna ask. Was it scanning us?
They're talking, and I don't know what they're talking about. I don't, I don't speak the
Right.
flora language,
You don't
but
speak algae, so yeah.
I don't speak algae. But there was some kind of an interface between, and I think that that might mean that part of its purpose has to do with a and this is just me, doing my thing. This is a study at this point. um as if the story, the collective story or the collective records of this planet are stored within the flora. Namely, there is almost a kind of like, let's get up to speed, like let's have a family meeting of all the
Right.
flora on this planet. And Three Eye Atlas was almost kind of like a teacher or an instructor or somebody that comes in and checks on the records, like a
Okay, so
librarian.
so here's an understanding on this that makes a lot of sense. They say that and there's a good reason to think this, that water is the ultimate storage of like the
Yeah,
Akashic records and stuff,
sure.
right? Anyway, and plants are, of course, huge repositories of water. But here's something factual. There's a hidden component to Three Eye Atlas that NASA won't talk about. There's a number of people that say it's emitting radio frequencies at these strange frequencies. One of these strange frequencies happens to be a resonant frequency of lignans of wood. So that was a little
Mm.
weird, right? Okay, so that's a little odd. I would expect there's these scientists, by the way, that have this idea just from the trajectory of Three Eye Atlas that it is. Now, by the way, NASA is saying no, it's not emitting any radio, that we're not talking to it, none of that. There's a lot of people saying that's horseshit, that there's stuff going on. Anyway, though, so there are scientists that way back when and all the way through, and even more now, are maintaining that with the latest course correction that Three Eye Atlas did, they're maintaining that this is an obvious intelligence gathering expedition
Mhm.
focused on life to see
Mhm.
where the signals of life are coming from. So if
Mhm.
if you take the ontological viewpoint, you start off with supreme consciousness, then everything that is within the illusion is vibrating. It's constantly within supreme consciousness and sending out waves of who it is and so on and so forth. And this occurs at a giant collective level, and all of the life in our solar system is broadcasting out on the life frequency. And so they may be able to pick that up and want to come and check us out. That's the supposition of these scientists with 3i Atlas. So do me a favor and do a poll on that. Just, is 3i Atlas analyzing or sampling for life?
Let's see. So I've just pulled the Knight of Pentacles, which Pentacles is synonymous with the element of earth. And what knights do, they are the messengers. And they're also, just in terms of timing, this is long term. So I think it's safe to say that the effects of 3i Atlas almost have this XR sort of extended release effect, where we might even see month after month or year after year, it kind of evolves or it changes here. And
Okay,
I
so
will
there's
say,
something. You go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting that out of all the cards, the first one that comes out, and I had my cards right here, so I didn't hesitate. And I was hoping you'd ask for a poll, um, but the discs or the earth, namely the knight being a court, being a person. I do think that it's telling that 3i Atlas is being represented in my cards as a thinking sort of sentient um,
Night.
intelligence, and
Well,
not just,
okay. The night also is that which is sent out on expeditions.
that's right. The
Yeah,
knight, yes, he
yeah,
does
yeah,
the work.
yeah. So okay, so that makes a lot of sense there. And I too think that that's what it's doing. Now, you're also correct, though, in terms of the timing, I think, right? Because on March 16th, it's going to be at the hill point between the sun and Jupiter. And it can release satellites then that would be permanently parked around Jupiter, or it could kick them with a little bit of energy and they could fall in on the planet, that sort of thing. When it was back on the other side of the sun, it may have left satellites to monitor the sun and the rest of the solar system. It is 5 million tons less heavy after it came out from around the sun, meaning
What?
it shed mass. It was 33 billion tons when it was just trucking along, and it was 5 million tons lighter when we saw it through these gravitational measurements. So it dropped something off
It
one way
drops
or
something
another.
off.
And it's too much. That 5 million tons is too much to be simply material burned off by the solar wind by being so close to the sun, right? Um, so anyway, so a huge amount of mass that it's lost, and will it do it again near Jupiter and then head off somewhere else, right? But I do agree with the scientist and with your card reading that this is an expedition, and I think it's a biosensing expedition. I think it's here looking for life.
I think so too. And I just wanted to add to, I mean, this is super fascinating. I'm all like all my nervous system now, I'm all excited. Um, But I just wanted to say, because I also have several other decks of cards, and Heidi and I have been doing this for years, where we create our own decks that are not they're not traditional tarot at all. They're more like phrases
I've
and
seen Heidi's.
yeah. Oh, yeah. We
Yeah,
call them.
yeah,
We have all kinds of lovable names for these cards. We call them
yeah,
hometown haters, because they'll really cut to the real center of the issue here. But I just wanted to add, because I have a mixture of runes. I use a mixture of Nordic runes that I put in these cards. And I have the rune here for harvest, reaping of rewards for past efforts and justice. We also have transmutation and metamorphosis. We have patience and planning. We have the rune for birth, new starts, fertility, and the true home. And just as you were mentioning Jupiter, and I believe there was a question in there somewhat like, is it going to do the same thing around Jupiter? I
Jupiter.
immediately got the yes card, big yes with an exclamation point. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And something that comes to me as we're discussing this is, I wonder, this is just a study, okay? But I do wonder if there is some kind of a communication taking place where the sun, the way that our sun interacts with our flora, namely our flora, is possibly going to change, or if there's some kind of a, I hate the word upgrade because it's so like, I just don't love it, but it is some kind of a change, a shift. I wonder if the sun was potentially given something to then interface or interact with our, plants and animals in a way that the planet really needs at this time. Another quick note I want to make, and then I'm going to let you keep going because everybody's here for you. They're not here for me. Um, is the agricultural side of this is massive. And I can't understate it in good conscience because it is so big. And I want you guys to remember again, I come into this three eye atlas thing with a completely neutral POV. I don't know much about this stuff, so blank slate. But as a reader, I can the themes there. It's like the illustration in a book, and it's like this is clearly something about farming and agriculture. And I'm thinking, food and our plants, even the healing power of our roots and our herbs. This is something that can probably more than anything else bring humans back to a center, bring people back to a knowing of our symbiotic relationship to the earth and subsequently everything. So I just wonder if this does have a lot to do with our trees, our plant systems, the algae in the ocean. They're interfacing in some way here.
They could be being sampled.
Okay.
There's also a deeper level there. Humans are not native to Earth. We were given agriculture. Was it through some kind of an intervention by the same people that have sent Three Eye Atlas? Your runes mentioning the transformation.
Yeah.
Where our government's already transforming itself in response to Three Eye Atlas, and it's starting its slow freak out process. When Three Eye Atlas alters itself again and drops a bunch of stuff off in Jupiter, the government's going to go absolutely crazy. Are they invading the planet? Do we have to deal with, foreign invaders just over one planet away? That kind of thing, right? And they got to Jupiter. How soon can they get to us? And did they leave something behind the sun that is going to impact our orbit? All of these things, right? And it did indeed seem to cause specific kinds of CMEs when it was over on the perihelion, on the closest approach to the sun. And so you may have some justification for saying that there is something in the nature of a solar change. Also, if we look at it, our sun in my youth was yellow, and now it's white. So this is a natural process with the sun anyway. And Three Eye Atlas has been trucking here a long time, presumably. So it may be participating in that process in the sense of arriving here because of known changes within the sun for whatever purpose. Now, I'm not assuming. So my approach is very much a um, self-contained. Okay, so I don't want any help from space aliens. I'm actively thinking that no space alien is here for any other reason than their own interest. And so I'm not assuming that they're going to in any way aid humans, maybe as a side effect, but not as a deliberate effort. If I'm proven wrong, that's very good. And
Right.
if I'm proven correct, at least I'm prepared for that reality. So I also have this other thing, right? So when I died in 2018, I was told, they bribed me to get me to come back. They bribed me with a meaningful work, global battle. And I'll get into that in a second. Then they bribed me with knowing love. And so that's what got me. And then I come back and I've got Heidi, right? So this is manifested. We've had I'm in love with Heidi. And so I know this, right? This is something that was promised to me and it's come out, the meaningful work. So the only thing left unfulfilled is this great global battle. And the issue there is something of the linguistics. It wasn't a war, and it was when your greater self is talking to you, it doesn't actually use words. It just pulls images out of your mind, pulls the words right out of your mind, out of your base. So they're just there. And so it was very precise. It was a great global and battle, as though one battle and it's all done, right? So, I've been preparing for that, right? And it may be that battle can express in any number of ways. Maybe it's going to be a battle with government over their butt-headedness, not actually battle with the space aliens. But nonetheless, I'm getting prepared for that because it seems like we're sort of, headed that direction, especially with Three Eye Atlas. So as I say, I'm not I'm not going to take the um, light and love kind of approach to Three Eye Atlas. I'm going to take the approach of I want to look at this critter and see what's going on. Right.
Right, a case study, so to speak.
Exactly. Right.
Exactly.
Wary, paranoid.
I understand that. I certainly do. I think, it's so funny. I think paranoia is it's a symptom of being very attuned. Of course, we're paranoid. We know how bad it is,
Universe
you
has
know.
taught us. Yes.
Yeah, and the sort of blissful, I think a lot of that comes from just simply not knowing how rough
How
it
screwed you
is
really
out.
are.
Exactly, exactly. Although I am an optimist, it's just my nature because I again, the electromagnetic field of the heart, we find the other hearts that are attuned to our frequency. So in that, even in my darkest times, my darkest days, my heart has come through because it has drawn the right people to me, to be supportive and to just hold me,
There are no
hold me while I cry.
yeah, there are no meaningless coincidences, right?
True. No
Speaking of
meaningless coincidences. Absolutely. And
okay, so speaking of which, I have to go and put my bread into the loaf pan.
yes.
So this will take a few minutes. We could end here, or if you want to give me four or 5 minutes, we can continue as you choose.
Well, I think, we've crossed the hour threshold, so we can go ahead and end it here. I'm so thankful for your time. And ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Cliff High. I say this all the time, but I've followed you since I was 19 years old, which feels like a lifetime away now. And I'm just honored that we get to have these talks. And I'd love to maybe do this sort of thing once every few months, as we have
Sure.
done. But I just want to thank you so much again for your time and for allowing me to pick your brain and for all of your support and your presence here on planet Earth at this time. So thank you, Cliff.
It's a okay. Thank you very much, Jenny. It's a pleasure. Always glad to talk to you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Until next time. See you later.